Now in the Legend of Zelda games, combat plays a big role. Ganondorf always orders his minions to rip Link to shreds after all. So of course we defend ourselves every time Moblins, Darknuts, or Bokoblins attack us out of nowhere. However, out of all the enemies seen in the series, there's one we have seen the most by far, the Bokoblins. But which version of this enemy is the strongest? Which one is smart and powerful enough to potentially beat Link in combat? Well, let's have a look at all the ones we see in the series to get an answer to our question. Now first up, what is a Bokoblin even? Well, they are reoccurring enemies in the Legend of Zelda series who are similar to Moblins. Typically, Bokoblins carry various forms of weaponry, things like sharp machetes and boko sticks which they will use to whack you. And if they don't have any weapon, they will do it by hand. Aside from that, they look like some sort of beast from hell. I don't even know what kind of creature looks sort of similar to them. All we know is that they are created by characters like Girahim. This is even stated in Hyrule Historia because it mentions the following when talking about the events from Skyward Sword. At the Earth Spring, Zelda was captured by Girahim's henchmen, the Bokoblins, but was saved by Impa of the Sheikah tribe, whose responsibility was to protect the reincarnated goddess. So it seems like they are created by powerful demons. It could even be that they came from below the surface, just like Demise and the members of his demonic horde, which means that they would be demons as well. Now I'm not sure how Ganondorf or any other villain creates more of them, but it must be black magic or something. Otherwise, we wouldn't really see them in so many games after all. But now that we know what they are, we can take a look at them to find the strongest of their kind. Now let's start by looking at the type that we see in the Wind Waker, the first game where we ever saw them, and quite a lot as well. The most common is the blue-skinned version that wields a boko stick into battle, although he does lose it rather quickly once you start to beat him up. Then there's a green-skinned elite version that carries some more serious hardware, a machete and wooden shield, and these are a way bigger challenge. And then we have the pink Bokoblin. These just carry a telescope, which they use to scan their surroundings and to attack. As you can imagine, they aren't very strong. They all attack by swiping their weapons at you, and once in a while they will jump back and strike, which can send you flying backwards. Now out of all of them, the green Bokoblins are the strongest. They are a little bit more versatile as they are able to defend themselves with their shields. However, they aren't particularly tough enemies, and can be defeated by most conventional items in the game, especially a freaking sword. So in this game, the Bokoblins aren't too special. The green ones can be tough to deal with, since they have good weapons and aren't completely stupid, but it can be better to be honest. Now the next game they are seen in is Twilight Princess. They look like some sort of imp and are a lot weaker and dumber. There's a blue-skinned variation who carries a small stick, which is quite easily killed, and later on there's also a purple one with a sword that's tougher. Now overall we won't spend a lot of attention on these because they are quite weak, and when it comes to combat, they are less experienced than the previous ones we mentioned. Overall, these guys are pretty darn weak. However, in the very next game, Skyward Sword, we see a lot stronger Bokoblins. Like, significantly stronger. They are a lot bigger and stouter than the previous Bokoblins, and also have an extra edge of difficulty. And later on, they even introduce an even tougher blue one. Now, one major difference is that they can all of a sudden block attacks with their weapon. And in order to defeat them, you must slash around their defenses. Now, some of them are also able to wield bows and bombs, while others may carry a monster horn, which they can summon more Bokoblins with. So in general, they have more tools, weapons, strategies, and are somewhat more intelligent and sociable than their past incarnations. They even build small monster strongholds during the conflict with the native Mogma throughout Eldin Volcano. They even defend these small outposts with the aid of lookout towers and large boulders, which they can roll downhill in order to crush you. So clearly they got quite the upgrade in this game. And as most of you know, I don't like Skyward Sword, but I will applaud it 100% for adding things like this. Now there are also new types, the Technoblins and the Cursed Bokoblins. The first one uses ancient but advanced technology, allowing them to harness electricity to attack and defend themselves better. And the second one is some sort of zombie, which can only be found in the depths of the ancient cistern. They don't use weapons, but they are extremely resilient and can withstand way more damage than their living counterparts. So clearly the Bokoblins in this game didn't become a little bit stronger? No. They actually became significantly stronger. They are well organized, have new tactics like watchtowers and a horn to rally troops, have better weapons, and they are also a lot better at combat. So as you can imagine, all the Bokoblins could easily defeat any of the types seen in games like The Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. But we still have one group of them left, seen in the most recent game on the Nintendo Switch, Breath of the Wild. Here we mostly see them in primitive encampments. Now, some of the things seen in Skyward Sword also return in this game, like watchtowers and the horn to warn others of a Link attack. There are also a lot of different varieties of Bokoblins now. We have the standard red ones, and the progressively stronger blue, black, and silver Bokoblins. And in Master Mode, there's also a golden Bokoblin. Now they carry the Boko type weapons most of the time, but some also use weapons like a soldier's broadsword. Usually they just simply attack, nothing fancy really. But most of them are quite smart and will use objects around them to take you out, like bomb barrels. But that's not all. They can also do stuff like set their wooden weapons on fire to deal even more damage. So in general, they aren't too bad actually. They are quite strong and have actual tactics of winning a fight or defending themselves. However, now that we finally have covered all of the Bokoblins seen in the series, we can start comparing all of them. Because as you could have noticed by now, not all of them are created equally. Some are a lot smarter and stronger than others. Just take the first two we discussed for example. Both in The Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, they are quite primitive. Sure, they got weapons, but certainly no strategies or tactics. So they are rather weak. Most people can quite easily defeat these foes because there's nothing to them, to be honest. So those two will certainly lose. Which means we have to cross them off so we can focus on the last two, Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild. Clearly both these groups are quite strong. They have all the bells and whistles, good weapons, combat skills, legit tactics, ways of communicating, and more. However, which of the two is better? And out of all the different types seen in those groups, which specific one is the strongest? Well, personally, I think the Bokoblins seen in Skyward Sword are the most powerful, and that's because of a couple of reasons. While both groups set up camps with watchtowers that have guards on top with bows and a horn to warn the rest, the ones in Skyward Sword take it all a step further. Their bases look a lot better and even use certain things to make it harder to get through them, like searchlights, traps, and more. So this already gives them an edge, clearly running a more well-organized and professional camp than the ones seen in Breath of the Wild. But that isn't all. There's also another thing that makes them a whole lot stronger than the ones in our most recent Switch title, and that's their combat skills. The Bokoblins in Skyward Sword actually try to block incoming attacks and counterattack, something that none of the others in the series ever do. However, I will be honest, the reason why they can even do all of this is because Skyward Sword has motion controls. It was made back in the Wii days after all, so Nintendo wanted to add real sword fighting to the game. Well, sort of. And so you can use the Wii remote to sort of do sword combat. And that's a lot more fun to do if your enemies also try to do something about your attacks. And so the Bokoblins in this game block your attacks, forcing you to react appropriately to their moves, making combat more dynamic. Now the motion controls are quite meh in my opinion, so it's a hit and miss, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. All I'm saying is that there's a reason for it all, and it's not really to make the Bokoblins more interesting, because a ton of enemies in the game do this as well. However, thanks to all of this, they are by far the strongest group of Bokoblins seen in the entire series. But which type of them is the best? Well, I think we can all agree that there's one that is the strongest by far, the Technoblins. They wear plated armor, making them even tougher than any other, and they also have an electric baton-like weapon. This is an incredibly strong combo, as you can imagine. If an enemy like this would be in Breath of the Wild, it would be a pain to deal with, especially because they can shock you by blocking your attacks. So personally, after going through all of them out there, I would say that this type of Bokoblin is the strongest out of all. Not many in the series can even rival them, and even if a gold Bokoblin would try to take it on, the shock would be too effective, disarming him constantly. So at the end of the day, the Technoblins are the winners, destroying everything in their path. However, be sure to let me know what you think in the comment section below, because maybe you know something that I don't. Also be sure to check out the videos in the upper right corner, hit the like button, subscribe, and also click the bell, then you won't miss anything. Leave a comment naughty or nice, and I will see all of you in the next one.